Bruce Springsteen has been hailed by critics as the best thing yet to happen in the 70s. His second album confirms that belief. John Landau said, "I saw rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. He made me feel like I was hearing music for the very first time." His first album is titled Greetings from Asbury Park, and the second is The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. Bruce Springsteen on Columbia Records.
Are you hungry?
Bruce Springsteen was on stage for an incredible 3 hours last night. He's at the Garden tonight and tomorrow, all sold out. Scalpers were getting $50 a seat last night, but Springsteen will be back in town next month. I have no more details, just the promise he will be back, and he's worth waiting for. I have heard just about everybody, but I've never heard anybody make rock and roll music like Bruce Springsteen.
What? Hit it again!
How do you keep that pace up? That was 3 solid hours.
I don't know. I really don't. You know, it's, I'm not sure. You know, like I said, it must be desperation or something, you know? I don't know. So it's the thing. It's the, I guess, probably the only thing that I live for, you know?
1, 2!
You know, one of the initial things, I want to have fun. You know, I just started out doing it for fun. And that's a big reason why I still do it. I'm lucky that I can make a living at it now, you know? And the day it stops being fun probably be the day I stop doing it, you know? If you want an audience, well, you gotta like get off your ass. You gotta go get it, because you know they're not gonna come. Oh, hi, you know, walking around knocking on the door. Hey, oh, you're so great. You know, they're not gonna. You know, that's like a bunch of jive, man. You know, it's like if you want it, you better go take it. You better go work for it. You know, and that's what I'm interested in.
I got a wife and kids and Baltimore J. I went out for a ride and I never went back.
I think Bruce began to kind of realize that he spoke for the everyman, because he was the everyman. I mean, you look at his, you know, upbringing, you know, in New Jersey and so on. This is someone who comes from a very mundane, suburban, working class kind of background. And when Springsteen is doing his best work, it's when he's talking about those experiences, those things that people from that kind of background, you know, can relate to. And that's, I think, kind of what created his audience. That's what people woke up to, as wow, this person is like spokesperson because he is one of us.
I met her in a Kingstown bar. We fell in love and went head to head.
You can change people's lives and people's directions in some ways. You know, that's the best thing that you can do, and that's what happened to me when I first heard, you know, the early rock and roll and stuff. That's what it did for me.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
Well, Christine, one of the things that critics have been saying about rock and roll in the 70s is that there's been very little substance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band are substance. It's rare when a performer can capture the imagination and undivided attention of 14,000 people. But that's exactly what happened Wednesday night.
I don't think you can take the opportunity to perform away from Bruce Springsteen. I mean, if he had no opportunity to perform, he'd perform anyway, because that's at the end of the day, that's who he is. Yeah, he's a songwriter. Yeah, he's a recording act. Yeah, he's a great guy from New Jersey. But most of all, he's a performer. He's about the performance. And the records are an anticlimax to that, and they always will be.
Everybody's got a hungry heart.
He's a complete showman, almost to the point of being crass about it. I mean, it's deliberately showman. It's almost vaudeville. Some of what he gets up to, almost like a carnival barker at times. He brings an intensity of performance. It's almost unmatched. Bruce has a lot, and he shows no signs of slowing down with any of it either. He's really one of a kind as a performer.
Right out of college, I knew I wanted to be a recording engineer. I had never seen a recording studio at that point. But in college, I worked in the school radio station, and I just got this bug. I wanted to be a recording engineer. So I started applying to studios around, and there's this one near where I live here. It's 30 miles north of Manhattan, called 914. And after convincing the guy to hire me, he said, okay, you can start. And my first day, I went into the studio, and it was Bruce Springsteen's first day on his first album. Well, at the time, they were actually demos for, as far as I understand, Mike put up his own money and recorded the group. He discovered Bruce. He thought he was great. He brought him into the studio, and they started doing some songs. It was bass, drums, guitar, and organ and saxophone. That was the lineup at the time. I was really impressed with the music. I thought it was great. Of course, it was my first gig in a studio, and my friend said to me, oh, you'd think anybody was great. It's your first job. But no, I was telling people about Bruce. I just thought he was incredible.
Becoming a man, which everybody's supposed to be on the way to being. That is, all you guys. There could be a song about becoming a woman, too. But I don't know. For a song about growing up. Well, I stood stone like at midnight.
Every performer who ever comes along is usually called a new something or other. And Springsteen went through years of being called the new Bob Dylan. It's understandable. Very poetic singer-songwriters. There's absolutely no doubt that Bruce was influenced by Bob Dylan. You know, Dylan was influenced by Woody Guthrie, and you know, and so it goes backwards, and that's how these things go. I think what Bruce had was he's got some of Dylan's kind of one man and his guitar singing about you know, the working man, which Dylan did early on, and then he became his own person.
I was open to pain and crossed by the rain, and I walked on a crooked crutch. I strode all along to a fallout zone and came out with my soul untouched. I hid in the clouded wrath of the crowd, but when they said sit down, I stood up.
Well, he starts out really Woody Guthrie, like really Bob Dylan. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons that are drawn between him and Dylan. And they're obvious comparisons, but they're also slightly superficial because there's something fundamentally different about those two artists. And that's that there's something about the way that Bruce Springsteen weaves his narrative that makes it seem as though he's talking from personal experience, whereas Bob Dylan kind of has that kind of poetic detachment where he's telling a story but not necessarily his.
I think in those early days he was tremendously enjoying playing with words, and to some extent the wordplay was inspired by Dylan, just the sheer joy of messing about with words, you know, producing multiple rhymes within a single line and all that kind of thing. But he, on the whole, he wasn't following Dylan's subject matter or anything like that.
They're both poetic, but Springsteen's approach is in a way more romantic, more wildly romantic, particularly in the early days. And then he evolves beyond any comparison of Dylan to Woody Guthrie, Hank Williams, Johnny Cash. You know, there's always been a strong Van Morrison influence on Springsteen, James Brown, obviously Elvis Presley. He's sort of just like, in a way, a new rock and roll when he came out, and especially, you know, as his career became established, you know, it was like a breath of fresh air for rock and roll, because rock and roll was really in the doldrums at that time. So if it was just a Dylan influence, he would have ended up like all the other new Dylans, but he brought so much more to the table than just that.
I hid in the mother breast of the crowd, but when they said pull down, I pulled up. Oh,
people say you should write about what you know. Well, Bruce knew about growing up in New Jersey. He grew up close to Asbury Park. You know, Asbury Park was this great seaside town that really died a death in the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, it's still down. If now it's turning around a bit. He watched that kind of place die around him. It's very poetic. You know, there's a lot of visual imagery, and he, I think, very early on identified himself with that town.
There's a song about the circus.
New Jersey doesn't really have a sound. It has a really large music scene, and Springsteen opened the door for New Jersey's music scene, but it's never really had a particular sound. It's actually Springsteen that's colored any kind of sound that came out of New Jersey. The sounds of Asbury Park, he is in a way the architect of that, along with Southside Johnny and Little Steven. So Springsteen's colored that New Jersey sound. What's colored, the aspect of New Jersey that's colored Springsteen's music is in the references to New Jersey, the imagery of New Jersey. And that's almost on every single one of his albums in some way or another.
Circus times on the live wire, and the strong man Samson lifts the midget little tiny Tim way up on his shoulders, way up, and carries him on down the midway.
But one thing that Bruce has applied from those early days of writing about New Jersey is he's immensely detail-oriented in his songs. He will write about, he always gives people a name. He gives his characters names, even if it's usually Mary, you know, but he does, and he likes to really identify about a town, or he'll name a street. He'll do something it's like a novelist's trick, you know, it's the beauties in the details. And I think that's something he picked up from those first 2 or 3 albums of writing an awful lot about New Jersey and the dream that a lot of people, kids, teens have in New Jersey when they're 50, 60, 70 miles from New York City and they see New York City as being the be-all and end-all. And you get a lot in those first couple of albums, first 3 albums, about this idea of escape. And that escape is really getting in your car, because New Jersey's full of highways, and getting in your car and somehow making it into New York City and the big bad New York City. Very, you know, really, it's a drama that's gone through his records.
Sound-wise, they were getting into a little bit more production kind of a sound, whereas the first album was just like the band knocking out the songs. I think we were trying to get a little more of a special sound on the instruments. Well, I guess on the first album, they were just playing as a band and letting it happen. And then on the second album, I think they were trying to define the sounds a little more, trying to be a little more creative with the production. Bruce really wanted it to be a live sound. And they would do many, many takes. Sometimes they would do 100 takes on a song, because he was really going for the vocal. And whatever the band played when he got the vocal was the take. And he really didn't want to piece it together like a lot of people would do. He just wanted it to be a live take.
E Street Chapel, certainly there's a very, very, you know, kind of jazz-inflected kind of thing that's going on there, where, you know, you wouldn't necessarily, if you picked up the album at one point in it, think that this is, you know, going to be a big rock artist necessarily, because he's like pulling in all these different things that could pretty easily be confused with Van Morrison if you didn't know better. I mean, it's just that kind of sultry pre-dawn kind of feel and texture that you get from an artist like Van Morrison that it seems like Bruce Springsteen was kind of trying to not necessarily imitate, but I think that's all he was really capable of. You know, whereas, you know, once Born to Run came out, I mean, that was him, I think, really kind of coming into his own as both like a songwriter and a performer and as a rock artist.
Bruce's first 2 albums weren't really very successful, and he's kind of probably on his last roll of the dice with his record label, CBS Columbia. You know, he's got a lot of acclaim. It's not an uncommon scenario. He's known. He's popular with the critics, but he's not selling records. And I don't know if the pressure helped or what it was, but Born to Run just pulled everything together.
Out on the streets of a runaway American dream. At night we ride through mansions of glory and suicide machines.
It's an enormous step forward sonically and song-wise, presentation. It's a rock star's album, if you know what I mean. It has a confidence that a real confidence that is not there on those first two records. It's a record made by somebody who really sounds like he means business. And I strongly believe also it's really stood the test of time, and it was a masterpiece. And I don't think many people expected it based on his first two records with the E Street Band.
When to let me in, I wanna be your friend. I wanna guard your dreams and visions. Just wrap your legs around these velvet rims. Strap your hands across my engines. Together we can break this trap. Run till we drop. Baby, we'll never go back. Whoa, you walk with me on the wild. Girl, I'm just a scared and lonely rider. I gotta find out how it feels. I wanna know if love is wild. I wanna know if love is real.
Perhaps the first album is influenced by Dylan, well then the second album is influenced by Van Morrison. But with the third album, with Born to Run, he comes into his own voice. So it's a big musical departure from the first two albums in that he finds his own voice. While he's borrowing from Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, he finds his own, from a production value, he finds his own voice vocally and musically with Born to Run. There are a lot of comparisons that you can make between the wild romanticism of the second album and Born to Run. There's just like this epic grandeur in a lot of the songs on Born to Run that was also on the second album, but not so much musically, but from a production value standpoint, Born to Run is a much better made album. So that vision that he had, that epic quality to some of the songs, I think it's a little bit better realized on Born to Run because he's got better production value.
Like at the time of Born to Run, I was listening to a lot of Phil Spector and Dwayne Eddy and just your sort of traditional, like for me, a rock and roll guitar sound. That was, that was Dwayne Eddy, or that was like Peter Townsend, the chords, and I was not that blues influenced. I was never that into blues. I was into the soul stuff, into the R&B artists.
How did you react at the time to the promotion that CBS put behind Born to Run? Because it was a massive promotion campaign, wasn't it?
I think for those days it was, for 1975. What made it seem like a lot was the time of Newsweek covers, and it was a funny kind of thing. Plus, there was a lot written about it. There was a lot written in the press. There was not like a lot of ads. It was like something that it was just focused on by the media in general at that time. So it seemed like I think a bigger campaign than it was. It was a big thing,
Well, Born to Run obviously is the pivotal track of his career. It's, I think, undoubtedly one of his greatest songs, but it is a terribly difficult song. It never emerged from being difficult. It was horrendously difficult for them to record in the studio. They messed about with Born to Run for a year in a tiny little studio where they'd recorded the first couple of albums. And then when John Landau came on board and started to co-produce a bit before moving into being Bruce's manager, he moved them into, I think it was the record plant, all singing, dancing studio. And they tried it again and again. The strange thing is, with the recorded version, what happened is they went back to the first recording, but they tried for a solid year to improve on that first recording. It isn't an easy song, and the way he writes is never easy for the musicians, I think, partly because of this way he'll overwrite, if you like, and then insist on jamming stuff into the song, so he's constantly wrestling with the material. I've got to get this in here, It's like that. You feel, yeah, get in there. These are all crucial parts, It's got to be there. So he'll force it in, kind of thing. And then sometimes, I suppose, the song goes, blah, and explodes on him, And it's probably always like that. Any time he's going to play it with the band. It's just always a challenge. A lot of those songs he was writing back then are just always going to be a challenge like that. They've got a wildness about them.
Born to Run was a phenomenal success. It was also heavily hyped, especially in the UK. Maybe the first time we really all dealt with the word hype. It was all this, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and his name is Bruce Springsteen. Bruce had a tough time with that. He then ran into a lawsuit with his manager, stopped him recording and touring for a couple of years, at a point that you would expect him to come back with another album very quickly. I think it was almost 3 years before Darkness on the Edge of Town. And those kind of problems all show up in that album. I think to some extent that album is, I think if you look at Born to Run being an attempt to achieve the American dream, which is for most people fame and fortune, Darkness on the Edge of Town is an answer to that. It's the flip side of the American dream. It's actually examining the the negativity. And I think it's Bruce very, very quickly saying, I may be a rock and roll star. I'm not going to give that up, but I don't want to be one of these kind of boys in the bubble. I don't want to be one of, I don't want to be removed. I want to be singing about the real world. And songs like the title track, Badlands, he really, there's stuff like that on his first 3 albums, but I think he recognized the darkness in the world at large, and I think especially in his own fame. And I think there was a decision made that early on that he was not going to just go and become some removed, distant superstar.
Really still racing out at the trestle, but that blood had never burned in her veins. Now I hear she's got a house in Fairview, and a star she's trying to maintain. Well, she wants to see me. You can tell her the reason this song. Tell her there's a spot I need. Neighbors reach and tell her the darkness on the edge of town.
What happened was we had 3 years where we were out of commission, really, because of the legal thing. But during that time, we were doing small tours. We toured down south, and we toured the Midwest, and different parts of the country. And that's how we were keeping everybody, staying alive, keeping the band, paying everybody's rent and everybody's, things they needed. And so we were playing during that time. We did, I think, 4 tours during that 3-year layoff. And then took about 11 months to do the album. So that was about the time span, you know.
You said you enjoyed it very much, Bruce, but did you feel pressure on this album too, from the events of the previous 2-3 years?
There was a certain pressure, you know. It was like, because I knew that we'd done Born to Run, and like it meant a lot to a lot of people, and a lot of people supported me on that thing. You know, a lot of people in the English press did, and a lot of people in America. You know, there was a lot of like supporters that really helped get it out. You know, and there's a pressure not wanting to let them down, and you don't want to let yourself down, and you're testing yourself to see, like, you know, what you got, you know, what you got to, you know, give. So those pressures are the main pressures that I feel, that I felt, you know.
Definitely flows out of Springsteen experiencing sudden stardom, having been a sweat-stained worker all his life and penniless. But chiefly it was about experiencing stardom, experiencing all that attention, experiencing the adulation, questioning it from the outset, which I think is one of the strengths of his career, is that the moment he got adulation, the moment he got fans other than local people he knew, he was questioning it, he was worrying about it. It didn't seem right to him, it didn't sit comfortably with him. The whole of Darkness on the Edge of Town is definitely a reaction to that, and it is a bleaker view in all sorts of ways, whether the songs are semi-autobiographical or whether they're about other people. Feeling about life with a capital L that was growing in him through that period is expressed in the more metaphorical sense with Darkness on the Edge of Town, where town is kind of the place, it's the place where you live, but it's also sort of the place where you're hiding, because there's life out on the streets, all the kids together, the band's playing, etc. In a sense, that's an illusion, and so you get what I think is this very powerful image of you come to the edge of town, the street lights stop quite literally, and there's the blackness. But beyond that, the darkness is something else, just the whole mystery of life that we sometimes allow ourselves to be aware of, and which is probably not all that comforting when we do let that awareness in, that we're not in control, that we don't know what's going on, we don't know where we're going, that we're subject to forces and pressures in all sorts of senses that are going to kick us around. We're not on top of things necessarily.
Gonna be a twister and a blow, everything down, and ain't got the faith to stand its ground. Blow away the dreams that tear you apart. Blow away the dreams that break your heart. Blow away the lies that leave you nothing but lost and broken hearted. But also makes me how to understand if I could take a moment into my.
I think The River was a real Bruce Springsteen triumph. I really do. People sort of joked about how it was all songs about cars, but they're songs about broken cars. And I think he got in at that point, and he understood that if he had a responsibility as a songwriter or a path as a songwriter, it was to write about where the American dream goes sour. And I think that's really, he was always touching on that, but I think by the river he had found this notion of writing for everyman. You know, I always think of Bruce as almost like a cipher for the everyman in America, and I think he recognizes that and tries to take on that responsibility as best he can.
It represented some more of his darkness type songs, definitely. He turned back also to basic rock and roll with songs like Cadillac Ranch, Ramrod, I'm a Rocker. Personally, I don't think those are good songs. It's as if at that point he'd gone beyond songs like that and wasn't comfortable with them anymore, but he just thought they ought to be there, that he ought to have the light and shade thing on the record.
Well, there she sits, buddy, just a gleaming in the sun. There to greet a working man when his day is done. I wanna pack a pop, I wanna pack my hand, wanna take him down the Cadillac Ranch. They'll out fence, white walls and skirts, rides like a little bit of heaven here on earth. Buddy, when I die, throw my body in the back, ride me to the junkyard in my Cadillac.
He has 3 amazing sides on the river. You can't really put out a 3-sided album, you know, you need that 4th side. If the river had been a single album, it would probably be his best album. But because it's a double album, there's you know, some material there that maybe doesn't hold up to the rest of the material. There's also an interesting thing about the river in that it's a departure point for Springsteen. He's in the period of music, the new wave era, the post-punk era, where he's sort of got a real new wave vibe going on with some of the songs. At the same time, he's growing older and is embracing American roots even more than it ever had before. And you have songs like Wreck on the Highway, and you can see that he is going into the direction that he'll take with Nebraska, where he'll get really rootsy and raw. And so all that is on the river, so it makes for a really eclectic album, which in some ways, you know, if you're not thinking about it, might be considered an unfocused album. But really what it is it's a crossroads. And like most crossroads, you know, trying to figure out which way to go. And, you know, fortunately, he goes into the direction of Nebraska, which is absolutely one of his best albums.
Nebraska is a fascinating album for so many reasons. It would be fascinating enough to take a major rock superstar like Bruce Springsteen, and who fronts a big band and is, you know, sells millions of records, and have him go off and make a record as dark and as acoustic and a record that doesn't need his band. That would all add up to a lot. It certainly did in the early 80s. Then the real story about Nebraska is that it's actually his home demo tape, and he recorded Nebraska on a little home 4-track on a cassette tape, and then took it to the band, and they started trying to work up the songs, and I believe Little Steven was one of the first to say, I don't think the band can do this any better.
There's a place out on the edge of town, sir, rising above the factories and the fields, where ever since I was a child I can remember that mansion on the hill.
When you look at Springsteen later in his career, when he doesn't write for the E Street Band, the material somehow isn't quite as good as when he does write for the E Street Band. I don't know why that is. I know there's a great brotherhood there, and it's obviously a very inspiring relationship. But with Nebraska was written for the E Street Band. It just wasn't recorded with them. And so he has these great songs that he's gonna blow out with the band on an album, but when he plays back the demo, he's like, I'm done. This is great all on its own. I don't need the band for this. I'm gonna put it out solo acoustic. So you have the power of songs written for a band, yet presented solo acoustic. It just makes for just an incredible amount of energy. He always brings this incredible energy to the table, and in that case, he brings it to the table all by himself.
There's a thread that runs through all of Bruce Springsteen's music, and that's a kind of isolation. You know, it's a sort of removal, you know, a sense of having been alienated. And that's something that I don't think he ever really articulated as fully as he did with Nebraska, where basically it does sound like he just sat down with the tape recorder and just poured his soul into this thing. And that's a really interesting thing for someone like him to do, because, I mean, he had achieved some very significant success, and for him to hold himself up and just sit down with a guitar and do something like that, I think it just says everything about his integrity as an artist. And it is a dark album. It's deeply introspective, and you have to just wonder exactly where all that's coming from.
Tonight, down here in the valley, I watch the cars rushing by, home from the mill. There's a beautiful full moon rising above a mansion on the hill.
When you are that confident in your abilities, and you know you want to be around for a long time, and you think you've got the trust of your audience, or you believe you can establish that trust, you can afford to make left turns and trust that your audience will follow you. And what happened with Nebraska was saying to the audience, here's this very strange dark record, I don't expect everybody to buy it. I think the band were all comforted by the fact they'd already started recording Born in the USA and knew that that was coming right behind it. And Bruce made a certain amount of compromises on Born in the USA. It was his moment. It was his moment in time, the right age, you know, like I guess early 30s, the right age, you know, the right period in history, the right songs. There's a moment in time where every artist has to like seize that opportunity and say, you know what, this one time I'll do whatever you ask me to do. And if that means 7 singles off an album, if it means a bunch of videos, if it means touring for 2 years, you do it because you think, you know, I may only have this one chance to really capitalize on everything I've ever worked for. I have a feeling that Bruce very consciously did all of that with Born in the USA, knew full well what he was doing, and probably felt even halfway through, I won't ever need to do this again. I'll be financially secure, but I'll have made my impact and I won't need to do this again. So it's this just, it's the biggest record of his career in every sense of the word.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Born in the USA, certainly just from the sales, you can see, acquired him a whole mass of fans who were with him for 1 or 2 years just then, that's all. His previous top-selling album sold about 5 million. Born in the USA sold about 17 million within 2 or 3 years. His next album was back down to 5 million. So it drew an awful lot of attention to Springsteen and his music for a short period, but not necessarily a mass of people who would explore his other work.
Come back home to the refinery. Highway man said, son of it was up to me. Went down to see my VA man. He said, son, don't you understand now?
I think the thing about the right in America is there's a great tradition of misappropriating art for its own purposes. And yeah, obviously, Born in the USA, it's no secret, It's not an anti-war song, it's about Vietnam veterans coming back from the war and finding that they had been alienated from society that they had theoretically been sent out to protect. Reagan didn't get that, and there's something absolutely poetic and miraculous about that, because anybody who listened to the lyrics would have guessed that this is about disenfranchised Vietnam veterans, and the fact that Ronald Reagan was completely incensed at that and made it like the anthem of his presidential campaign it's beyond hilarious. It's perfectly fitting somehow because it just exposed them for the buffoons they were.
Promise me, baby, you won't let them find us. Only in your arms, let's let our love blind us. Cover me. Come on, darling, cover me. Yeah, I'm looking for love. Oh, come on and cover me.
His own view was that it was a one-off. He pretty soon came to feel that. I don't know that he felt that right in the middle of the fantastic stadium successes, you know, like when you're standing in front of 75,000 people at Wembley or something. Perhaps that's completely devouring and you don't question it. But in terms of the whole experience, he did question it. And so that's at least part of the reason that the following album is so much more quiet and intimate and domestic.
There's one record that you can just pick up that is kind of really unpretentious, not trying to make a big statement, not stripped down to the core, not political, a great singer-songwriter album full of just very, very good songs. Then Tunnel of Love is that album. But it's a really beautiful record, and I think it's kind of underrated, maybe because it's not trying to either his records tend to sort of shout out quite loud, or they make their statement by being extremely quiet. And this one is just, you know, it's the kind of record that you could file away with the singer-songwriters, not with the rock stars, but with the singer-songwriters, and it would really hold its own.
That was a record, I wrote it very fast, you know, and I was, you know, struggling to understand sort of, you know, marriage and what it meant, and I was learning a lot of things, and pretty much a lot of it came out in that music at the time. I mean, there's a million excuses as to how to avoid real engagement and connection with people.
You're sort of a workaholic, right?
I guess that's what, you know, what people call it, but it was something where I felt real confident in my job, and I didn't feel confident anyplace else, and so stay in your job, you know. It's like, that's where it feels good, that's where you're, you know, feel protected, you know. And outside of that, you know, you feel like, gee, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that. Quick, let me get back in the studio, you know. And, you know, but that runs out on you at some point, and you gotta kind of find your way to other things, and I really began to do that, I guess. And, you know, it was hard to do, you know, because to do that, you have to do the things you don't do well.
Tunnel of Love was well received, as they say, critically. However, he did lose those 12 million extra fans who'd bought Born in the USA, because Tunnel of Love is nothing like Born in the USA. Kind of deliberately, kind of what was because of what was happening in his life, I'm sure. I remember one good review of Tunnel of Love saying "trouble in the master bedroom" as being the theme, because Bruce by then was living in a mansion, of course. And that's just about what it is. You know, we know, sadly, Bruce's first marriage, I think he got married in '84, something like that, to Julianne, and it was already not working. And that album reflects the difficulties in his marriage. It reflects the difficulties within himself that he's feeling because he's not, in his view, making a good husband. It's Springsteen thinking about the big theme that he's very much returned to now, the theme of identity. It is an examination of identity in an extraordinarily sophisticated way, and very quiet, and there's it's not really about hits or anything like that, but it's a wonderful album. It's my favourite album in the entire history of music, in fact.
Well, now on a summer night, and I just get wrong. Come on,
played with the E Street Band for some of the guys since we were 18, you know. And I think I got to a place where I really felt at the end of the Born in the U.S.A. tour that there was some sort of like, it felt like we'd finished something somehow, you know. And I started to kind of experiment recording sort of by myself sometimes, and did a Tunnel Love record like that, and I did a Nebraska record like that, and really during most of the 80s, I guess Born in the U.S.A. was the record that I recorded with the band as it was, you know. And I felt like I'd gone a long time really playing with you know, with the same people, and I hadn't had a chance to sort of, you know, just go out and see what other people are going to bring to what I'm doing. And I think that you got, you know, there's some responsibility to try and step out a little bit, you know.
You know, I don't think that Human Touch and Lucky Town are undervalued albums. I think that was a point in Bruce's career when, you know, he wanted to take chances on doing something else with other musicians, and as far as Human Touch goes, it didn't work. Lucky Town is a good album. I think it would have been a better album with the E Street Band, but that's okay, you know. It's still a good album. It's not a great album. In my opinion, they are his two worst albums and should be considered as such.
I bought a bourgeois house in the Hollywood Hills, a trunk load of $100,000 bills. Man came by to put my cable TV, settled in for a night, my baby and me.
Human Touch was the work of 2 or 3 years, fretting away and sweating away. Lucky Town was done in the last 6 weeks before the album came out. That's why, well, it's not exactly why, but they did come out on the same day, and they were two different projects. He'd done this really sweated album, thought he was just going to release that, then suddenly hit a writing vein, did Lucky Town really fast, and you can probably feel the spontaneity in it when you listen to it. It probably just, production-wise, it probably does sound better than Human Touch, just has more life to it, and the songs get a better crack, I guess.
On these records, I had a little bit more of an opportunity to get back to the guitar a little bit, you know, and you know, so that's something I want to do more of. I feel kind of like I'm in a sort of a transitional kind of moment, you know, and that I'm on the record. I got interested in playing guitar a little bit more, which is what I used to do. I never used to sing or I was just when I started out, I was a guitarist, you know. I was like, you know, fastest guitar in Asbury Park, you know, for a while, and but there were so many guitar players, there were so many guys that played so well that I said, I better figure something else out besides
Maybe
it.
I'll sing.
Yeah, and so I started to write, you know, maybe I just try to write something that's emotional, something that feels meaningful, you know, that's something that feels like it has some passion and commitment behind it, something that I feel like delivers, you know, something. And I think that's, you know, when people buy my records, that's pretty much, you know, what I think my longtime fans, that's what they're paying for. Which when I put the Human Touch record, I felt like I didn't have enough of that, you know. I had some of it, but not as much as I wanted. And when we did the Lucky Town album, I felt like, yeah, this is this is where I want to be, and this is what I got to say right now. You know?
We might have made some friends with some billionaires. We got an island nice and friendly if we made it upstairs.
I think the problem with Human Touch is a lack of connectedness. I think he's not connecting with his audience. I think he's not connecting with the production. I think he's not connecting with the musicians involved in the production. I don't think they're his best written songs. And it's okay. I mean, you make one bad album out of an entire career, I mean, you know, that's pretty good.
Even the greatest of artists, and personally I rate Bruce, you know, right up there as one of the greatest of Americans. Yeah, you can't maintain a caliber, especially if you're going to take risks. And Human Touch and Lucky Town is the one moment in Bruce's career that I felt like either he was losing the plot or I was losing the plot. There are good songs there, but there's a good single album. The decision to release them as separate albums was an unusual one. Brave One, he may have felt they stood up as separate records. I'm not totally sure the audience did. And I think it was this one point where he's getting a lot older. This is where you often start losing sales anyway. People will still come to your concerts, but they're less likely to buy your albums. So he's going to be like losing a bit of attention, a bit of his audience dedication anyway. He certainly wasn't going to pick up much more with those records. They were, they were records that seemed to be born out of problems with marriage and uncertainty, and maybe midlife crisis. And to the extent that one needs to, if one's an artist and one lays one's soul bare, then I guess one could say that's Bruce laying his midlife crisis on the line.
Yeah, house got too crowded, clothes got too tight, and don't know just where I'm going tonight. The sky's been cleared by good hard rain. There's somebody calling my secret mine. I'm going down to Lucky Town, down to Lucky Town. I found down in Lucky Town, baby, down in Lucky Town.
I've read that he did some therapy at that time. I don't know if he's never said that he was medically depressed or anything like that, but he was definitely in turmoil, definitely dealing with all the reasons why he might have turned out to be a failure in life as opposed to in career, why he might indeed have plunged into depression. So I think that delayed him on the creative front for a considerable while. And also I think to some extent the evidence of Human Touch and Lucky Town is that it did knock him off course, that there was something not right in his life that was actually carrying over into somewhat lowering the quality of what he was creating. So it's a confused phase, and it's not right. And he'll say, well, I know people say they're my worst albums. He's well aware of that, and you can only say, well, yep, that's the truth.
Back with Born in the USA, Bruce's politics were misunderstood. He tried to bury them in the songs, and rightly or wrongly, that whole issue with Reagan trying to co-opt the song Born in the USA, he didn't really speak out, and I think he felt like he didn't want to get involved. I can't speak for him. I wonder if, in retrospect, he felt like it was a mistake not to come out and be more clear about what his song said. And I think the chance to write Streets of Philadelphia and have that used in a movie about AIDS gave him a chance to really say, I'm not just this working class hero, this anthemic rock hero, or the person who's made these these ballad albums, but I can find this middle ground. You know, I can have a song that will stick in your head from a movie. I can write a song that's politically direct and works on its own as a pop song. It impacted a lot of people. It was just used very, very wisely. You know, just used extremely wisely, and I think it's played a much bigger role as a result in his career than most people's lone 1 or 2 songs for movies would do.
I was bruised and battered, I couldn't tell what I felt. I was unrecognizable to myself. Saw my reflection in the window, didn't know my own face. Oh brother, are you gonna leave me wasting away on the streets of Philadelphia?
There is something really interesting happening between Bruce Springsteen and his fans around the time that, you know, he came out with Philadelphia, which is an amazing song. You know, it's so sad, and you know, and of course it just embodies the film, of the same name with Tom Hanks. But of course he plays a lawyer with AIDS, and you know this is still early days as far as awareness is concerned, especially in America. And I mean, the disease itself still carried a stigma, but it also carried, worse, the connotation of homosexuality, which is something that I think did something to not only alienate some of the fans that had been behind Bruce Springsteen for a long time, but I think it also made Springsteen rather alienated from his fans, because I think he was actually quite disgusted. There was something very, very strong about him doing that, about allowing himself to kind of take that sort of risk, perhaps knowing the sort of sensibilities that, you know, were probably shared among a lot of the people, a lot of his listenership.
Ain't no angel gonna greet me. It's just you and I, my friend. And my clothes don't fit me no more. I walked 1,000 miles just to slip this skin.
As far as I can see, makes sense to me. He says it too. It's like the song that led him into the next phase. The sound, somewhat related to the sound of on the Tunnel of Love album, the quieter songs with a keyboard ambience. I think he'd used a bit of that on Tunnel of Love, but it became more of a motif from then on. That it's mainly about just a mood setting from a synthesizer or other keyboard, ambiently behind the voice, and then all you concentrate on is the voice. It was a fantastic challenge, and he pulled it off, I think, and it's a beautiful track, just beautiful.
On the streets of Philadelphia, on the streets of Philadelphia.
I think he was trying to perhaps re-achieve the kind of credibility that I think he was beginning to lose with 2 of his previous albums, simply because, you know, I think that he no longer represented what people wanted to be. He was no longer, you know, heroic in what he was doing. He was simply becoming yet another disposable artist, because he did write the Tom Joad alone. I mean, he did something that's just like very, very powerful, and you know, in a way, it was just kind of like him reaffirming his identity, and it was something darker, and I think it kind of matched the cynicism of the time as well, but I don't think people were necessarily ready to hear it.
It's a song about losing everything you have if you've played by all the rules. Here in Northeast Ohio.
If that album had come out in 1965, it would have been an amazingly successful album. It would have come at a time when it was really ripe to be heard. But coming out in 1995, it's just, there isn't an audience, there isn't anybody who really wants to promote it. And so, you know, it kind of falls flat. But I remember when it first came out, I said, it's a tough listen. And I got some flack for that, for saying that it was a tough listen. It's like, well, tough listen, doesn't that mean it's not any good? No, there's a different, I mean, Les Miserables isn't an easy read. You know, it's not, you know, some romance novel you read on the beach. It's a tough read. You have to muscle through it. There are albums like that where you know, this wasn't meant as a form of entertainment. This was meant as a statement. At a different time, it would have been a more powerfully heard statement, but at the time it was released, I don't think enough people really wanted to listen to it.
Here comes Tom, here comes Tom. My sweet Jenny, I'm sinking down here down in Youngstown.
Ghost of Tom Joad restored his reputation among his core fans, for one thing, and amongst the critical community, if you could put it that way, for another. Like Nebraska, everyone immediately compared it with Nebraska, and quite appropriately, you know. It was a modern album, absolutely. All the stories were placed right up front. It's here and now, but it also does connect with the past. And of course, the Ghost of Tom Joad very specifically makes that statement. In the middle of the song, there's a very near quote of about 5 lines from The Grapes of Wrath, which is a speech that Tom Joad, the character in The Grapes of Wrath, made to his mother, saying about, wherever there's people being oppressed, I'll be there. That's the Ghost of Tom Joad, and he's come back in 1995 to be with these Mexican immigrants in California as their spiritual guardian.
What Tom said, wherever there's a cop beating a guy, wherever a hungry born baby cries, there's a fight against the blood and hatred in the air. Well, look for me, Mom, I'll be there. Wherever somebody's fighting for a place to stay, or a decent job or a helping hand, or if somebody's struggling to be free, look in their eyes, Mom, you'll see me. Well, the highway is alive tonight, but nobody's kidding nobody about where it goes. I'm sitting down here in the campfire line with the ghost of old Tom Joad.
Since Tom Joad, he's definitely proceeded in a clear line from there. It all connects now. He's on track, he's confident, he's doing his thing. There was a spell when there wasn't any new music coming out. What drew him back into making another album after a really long break was 9/11. Some of the songs are fairly specifically about 9/11. None of them is totally, 100% about 9/11, but a lot of them seem to refer to it in their imagery. There's lots of imagery of smoke and dust and confusion and death. Brilliant songs, many of them. He switches back then to what is obviously becoming almost his basic mode, which is the solo folk artist, kind of folk artist with Devils and Dust. Largely, it's not exactly a solo album because there's quite a lot of other stuff on it, some keyboard, ambient sounds, some string section stuff, 1 or 2 other odd players on different tracks, but it is that largely a solo feel to it. And in 2006, what he's singing is the Pete Seeger songbook. So here we go, drawing that line again through American music. Pete Seeger recorded with Woody Guthrie and Leadbelly in the 1940s. They were at the absolute forefront of the radical left folk movement in the 1940s. It's like nothing you've ever heard from him before. It's not the solo folky at all. It's a folky with a band. Of course, it's also, his first ever album of covers. None of them are songs that he's written himself. And, well, there we are. And he's still moving along. That's the thing. Full of energy, obviously. Really knows what he's about. Really focused in amongst all of that hoo-ha on the need for a change in American politics and the role that music can play in it. That's absolutely clear.
I hope that Bruce Springsteen goes on performing live forever. He always brings that energy to the table. I think he always will in one way or another. His audience is growing older with him, and that exhausting quality to his performances remains because we're all getting older. You know, we try to keep up with Bruce. It's really hard, and I think it's always going to be like that.